In a way, for quite a while, 30 years actually. What made you decide to go back to India and join Taj?
Yeah, 30 years in Europe was kind of a long time, but I thought the timing to come back was driven from three key reasons. One was purely family. My mother was alone, getting old, so she needed care. Second, and it was not practical to get her to Europe for language reasons. And, it's like they don't know at this age. They say you should not replant the old trees. So the second reason was the opportunity itself. I think being born and raised in India, to have an opportunity to lead a company like IHCL was significant. And last not least, it's a part of the group and the group leadership, which made the opportunity very exciting. I mean, working for Tata Group in India with one of the subsidiaries or one of the group companies is a great opportunity, and let's hope it works out well for both.
Okay, Deutsche Hospitality and Taj, that's like chalk and cheese, bratwurst and biryani actually. So how have you had to adapt to Taj and India after all these years?
I think actually at the moment, Suma is sitting here, she's trying to adapt to me as my colleague, head of development. Things keep changing and evolving, and you're right. I mean, if there were two things which would be very different, would be working in a governance environment in a German country for 5 years and then coming to India, which is also very strong on governance, but it just moves very differently. And the German system is very formal, very distanced, and the Indian system could be very personal and very informal. So my key learnings are, having spent 15 years with a Swedish-American company and then 5 years with a German company, I think you need to take the best out of all the three. So I would say the American style of marketing, the European style of management, but nothing to beat the Asian style of EQ, the emotional intelligence. And if you can combine the three, it can work wonders for anyone and any organization.
So one of the first things you did was to throw out what your predecessor did, was to move to a single brand, right? So he wanted to focus on Taj, and you brought back the upscale Vivanta and the upscale Gateway, and of course there's also the budget brand Ginger. Why multi-brand and not single brand?
My God, that's a question which cannot be answered like in one dimension. So I would say there are four things that one has to consider. One is scale. So the scale cannot come only from luxury. And if you don't have scale, you become irrelevant even in your own home market. So that's a very important part. And the growth, as per all the studies, as per STR, was coming in the upscale and mid-scale and economy segment. So, and over and above that, all the luxury destinations, at least within the Indian subcontinent, we are present in all those destinations, not with one, but with multiple assets. So that would have meant the demise of growth. So that's one, is you miss out on scale. The second is comprehensive brand management. This kind of, in a heterogeneous country like India, this one-size-fits-all doesn't work. There are a lot of important secondary, tertiary, semi-tertiary markets. They cannot all afford to have a luxury hotel like Taj, but they can have a nice hotel. So I thought a lot of good work was done with Vivanta, and I thought we should continue it. And it was not my decision actually, it was the entire management leadership team that came up with it. The third important thing is margins. I think in the panel previously, I have to say congratulations, for the first time I'm seeing in a hotel conference that margins were discussed. And the margins as we saw in the limited service, were much higher. The need of a general manager to join in is much lower in terms of number of months. So some of these brands help you drive margins, and if your margins are higher, you're less volatile. If you're less volatile, you're a stronger company on the stock exchange, which we are. And last not least is the culture. I think none of this works if your culture is not working, is not in sync. So you can't now suddenly make a gateway a Taj. You can't just tell an owner with whom you entered into an agreement for 20 years, like, listen, we have changed our strategy, now we will do only one brand, thank you very much. I mean, there is a legal obligation, there is a moral obligation, there is a collaboration obligation. So keeping all these four factors in mind, it had nothing to do with my predecessor. Actually, I didn't even talk to him about it. He must have had some reasons at that time to have pursued that strategy. And I think at this time and at the time of the cycle we are in, we are getting a little bit of tailwind. It actually makes sense to expand than to contract.
Right. Are you happy with 4 brands? Are you planning to add more? Maybe you were mentioning limited service, which is something you don't have.
We have actually a brand which we haven't talked much about. Is we are actually leading in the economy segment in India with the Ginger brand.
Mm-hmm. It's a budget brand, right? That's
it's a budget brand, so it can be limited service, it can be, premium economy or junior mid-scale, something like this. And we are doing a lot of work and we'll be relaunching Ginger within the next few weeks,
right,
with a new identity and a new design. And we think that will help us scale Ginger very fast and rapidly. And that is also the need for the local market.
What's your priority? Is it to defend your leadership in India or to grow the international footprint?
Well, we are very blessed to have presence in markets like London, like New York, like Boston, and just now Dilip had mentioned Maldives, like high margin markets, and having that, and even in the Mandela Square in Cape Town or in Dubai. I think we should slowly and carefully expand our international footprint in capital markets, commercial capitals and state capitals, which makes sense for us, which have more or less a strong connection with the Indian diaspora. So that would be like Toronto or Manchester or Birmingham would make a lot of sense. Bangkok would make a lot of sense. Singapore would make a lot of sense. KL would make a lot of sense. And that's a part of our strategy. However, we should not neglect 85% of our home market. And in our home market, this is just a name. I always say that there are 2 names that come out of India that ignite a lot of emotion and are valued all over the world. And one of them is Gandhi, and the second is Taj, even if it stands for the iconic Taj Mahal. But I think it's great, and our brand being now 115 years in the market ignites a lot of emotion. It's a lot of connect with the customers. So we should never neglect that, and that's where a lot of our profits come from. So we'll continue to do a bit of both, and it will not be like a complete reverse swing that we say, okay, now 80% will be international and 20% domestic. So preserve the core and keep stimulating the progress.
But we've heard just now that hotel consolidation has only made the big boys bigger. So for mid-sized chain, like yourself, Shangri-La, what do you think are your USPs when competing for hotels with the big boys? I mean, I've heard when I ask mid-sized chain CEOs, they always say, oh, okay, the owners have a direct line to you. Exclusivity still means something. Would that be enough?
No, that is not enough. But I do believe that there is a play out there for companies, specialist organizations like us, specialist brands like ourselves, because we can bring in the international aspect and service and Indian hospitality packaged and delivered anywhere in the world with the best of class performance. The rest is, a bit like a distribution game. So just now, again, the predecessor here and the panel just now said, the revenue manager is becoming more important than the general manager. But definitely not in a Taj brand worldwide. It will still differentiate itself from the service and from its class. And I think there are many such brands, and you mentioned one of them just now, but It could be a Scandic in Scandinavia, or it used to be an African brand, an African pride, etc. I think that niche play will always be there for all brands. I think the challenge is more for mid-sized companies, people who have like 300, 400, 500 hotels. I think it's becoming like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 hotels, or a couple of hundred hotels. So something in between is getting squeezed, and finding it difficult to position themselves.
I think you have a strategic alliance with Shangri-La where you combine or integrate the two loyalty programs.
Yes.
How's that working? Is that an answer for competing with the big boys? One of the ways, perhaps?
In any way, it is better than doing it alone, because I think the world is also going to get a bit more on cooperation. So I think this kind of cooperation, not only amongst hotel companies, but let's say even travel companies, let's say car rentals, etc., will all join hands and will make loyalty programs stronger or different than before. So as an example, when I was last 5 years living in Germany, Payback was a very strong program. In an ideal world, if with the help of Tata Group companies, we created one loyalty program for all Tata Group, and then invited the Shangri-Las and other companies to join in, that would be, one of its kind. So, things are being discussed, there are projects going on, some work out, some don't work out, but in an ideal world, that would be the wish to do like one Tata loyalty program.
Is it foolish to think that legacies like Taj will never be acquired? What does it take to protect legacies today?
Firstly, I think the audience will agree, this is foolish, right? Taj cannot be acquired. So, no, I think anything can happen anywhere in the world, but I do believe that Taj has a very special place in the hearts of the Tata Group. This was the second or third company that was launched. In the story, it was like this, that Mr. Tata was refused entry into a hotel because he was not British. And this is in the times of British Raj. And that's when he acquired the Taj, he named the legal company Indian Hotel Companies Limited. So I think there is a culture, there is a pride, there is a legacy, there is a sense of belonging. It's a very strong name. It's one of the exceptional companies within the group that does not have a Tata name to it. So there must be some reason for it. I personally feel it will be very good for the group.
What about you acquiring instead? Any plans of acquiring another company, hotel company for scale?
Well, we will always evaluate opportunities, but even if we were working on anything, now we are in the silent period. We are going to announce our results in 10 days' time, so I would not allude to anything positive or negative, at least in this forum, so my apologies for saying that.
People. I think one of the Taj's USP is actually people, and we've seen how Taj staff actually went above and beyond the call of duty during the last Mumbai attack. My question is, how do you build staff loyalty in this day and age when loyalty is quite cheap?
Actually, it is done genuinely, and it's been done over the decades and generations. So one of the things that is an important part of all Tata Group companies is giving it back to the community. So we've done that consistently. People work over several generations for the group, a lot of them, and they have been around, and they're very passionate about what they do. And I had grown up with this, although I never worked for Taj, but I grew up with Taj and had the similar kind of emotion. So I think that is one way of doing it. The other is what we call this heart and soul of the group is called the Tajness. And so then we exude that Tajness in various forms, in forms of staff magazine, in forms of label pins, in forms of core values. So that thing, the three letters, Taj, they stand for trust, awareness, and joy. And if you exude joy every day, if you bring trust, and you continuously make people aware of what's going around, you create that culture of collaboration and culture of loyalty and a culture of giving.
Thank you. Puneet, Chhatwal.
Thank you.